this is just amazing. So this, I didn't notice it until now, and I'm so happy I did, because I just find it so engaging, so much fun to travel my notes. You come to different type of associations when you write than when you see things. Hey everyone, it's Zsolt here. Yesterday I was on a Zoom call with Jerry Michalski, and at the end of the meeting we thought that what a bummer, we forgot to record our session because it would have been so interesting to share with you. Today I'm going to try to replay what we discussed. Of course, it's not going to be so interesting because I'm missing Jerry from the other side of the conversation, but I'll try to ask his questions and try to replay our conversation. Now, if you don't know Jerry Michalski is the owner and creator of Jerry's Brain. You can access it on jerrysbrain.com, but I'm going to include a link in the video description. And this is this giant mind map, online mind map of over 600,000 items collected over 27 years. And Jerry uses this amazing tool called TheBrain for this. And indeed, originally, this was the reason how we connected, because for 20 years, I was also using TheBrain. When I created ExcaliBrain, then Jerry reached out to me. And indeed, in his brain, you can find a note about myself. And here you will find our discussion from April 2022. And you can even watch the recording of our discussion at the time. So it's the reason we connected originally. And this time around, we were talking about Sketch Your Mind. So Sketch Your Mind is my new book coming out on 15th of June. And we were talking about Sketch Your Mind, as well as I was telling Jerry about what I've been up to over the past 3 years. The visual thinking workshop. So I told Jerry about the cohorts and that we are now already at cohort 13 and how the cohorts are relatively small. So typically 15 to 20 people or thereabout. And in this discussion, Jerry asked me if I ever considered creating recordings of the course and publish it as a self-paced material. And I said that indeed. So I have already published the self-paced course, and it has over 70 chapters of pre-recorded learning material. And this is where we forked into what I think is a super interesting conversation. So I started to show Jerry how I imagined how the cohort works, because the cohort now, compared to the earlier cohorts, so before cohort 11, all the cohorts were organized around, and they were getting longer and longer and longer. They were organized into sessions, but in each session, I explained the concepts, and if we had time, we did a bit of practice as well. And I turned it around to work like this, that these are the chapters of the self-paced course. So you can see here all the 70 whatever chapters that are there. And below here, you can see each of the sessions. So in each of the sessions, in the workshop, we do something hands-on, really practical, practicing what the material is about. So in session 1, we are doing concept mapping and idea atlases. Then in session 2, we create concept visuals. In session 3, we do story planning. Then we do a bit of visual Zettelkasten. And then in the end, we have a showcase and we put together our joint book on a page for the cohort. And as we were going through this material, and as I was talking to Jerry about concept mapping, we started to talk about the idea atlas. And so this idea atlas, the idea I take from How to Read a Paragraph from Richard Paul and Linda Elder. And basically the idea here is to first map out the primary ideas of a concept, or a book. Of course, we are talking about non-fiction books. And once you have mapped that out, you can you have something to attach the secondary and then the peripheral ideas to. So as you read the book is not just going to hang there in midair. It's going to be grounded in these pieces of primary ideas. And this is part of what we do in session 1 of the workshop. So this is actually in cohort 13. We are reading tiny experiments. And for me, the idea atlas starts at this extremely basic level of just simply capturing the table of contents. I like to make it a little visual. It's always slightly different, but it already gives me a reflection on the content of the book. Then I like to listen to a podcast with the author or watch a video and create a mind map of that. For me, this is extremely important because in the end, a book is a conversation with the author. And if I don't hear the voice of the other person in my mind, of course I can imagine it. But you know, reading a book, you will have a very different perspective on what you're reading depending on who is telling you those ideas. So for me, this is very important, and I encourage all the workshop participants to create their own mind map of a podcast. But what we did in the session was, for example, to create this concept map of the book. Now, this is after some high-level reading, so we haven't yet read the book at this time. We have gone through the table of contents, we listened to a podcast, we maybe flipped through the pages and got this high-level idea of what the book might be about. And so based on that, we created together this concept map, as well as we played with the double bubble map. We created 2 different double bubble maps. So this one we created to compare how atomic habits and tiny experiments are similar or different from each other. But then, as we were talking about this, I wanted to talk to Jerry about the 7-step concept visuals. I think now I'm not fully sure where we went off to. But anyway, so we're now going to come to the 7-step concept visuals, and I showed him how I can click into this image and then I can click further into this image, and these are all individual nodes. So you can see here that in the end, my visual here is built up from this card, and this card is built from this illustration, and then this illustration is built from individual pieces. So this is actually another illustration here that's part of this, and of course in this illustration I have this image. And this is where Jerry asked, or actually reflected, that the issue he has with pretty much every illustration tool is, even though you're reusing the same image in many different illustrations. So let's just see. We are now 1 day later. I shared my draft video with Jerry and he provided some feedback. The most important thing he pointed out was I didn't show you how a change cascades through different illustrations. In our recording, Jerry pointed out a typo. I corrected it and it changed on all of the drawings where it was used. So let me show you an example of this. So take, for example, this illustration about self-dissonance. This is about aligning your habits with your identity. This features on my book on a page for atomic habits. You can see it right here, as well as this features on this video or chart for Excalidraw Writing Machine. I'm going to include a link to that video in the description below. It's a super interesting video, but you can see it here, right here. Now, one thing I noticed about this illustration that I don't like is it's the text is in 4 lines, and I think it should really be only in 3 lines. It would look better. So I'm going to increase the size of this text element. And what I want to show you is how this change trickles through to this illustration, as well as it trickles through to the Excalidraw Writing Machine illustration as well. This is super powerful. You correct it once and it's corrected everywhere, but also this requires a full paradigm shift in how you think about illustrations. It's like time travel. You go back to the past and you don't know what the trickle effects of your actions are going to be. If you modify an illustration, it's going to be modified everywhere else. And you always need to pay attention. You need to look at your links to make sure that what you're modifying will not destroy existing illustrations. But it's also super powerful because you make one change and it's across the entire node. So now back to the original video. Using this in terms of how you can build a book on a page and how you have different type of basic illustrations. You can see here, of course, my tiny experiments. But for example, the illusion of travel. So this is from my illustration for finite and infinite games, where James P. Cars talks about this interesting phenomena that you might be traveling and moving from hotel to hotel, so you're actually not changing places, or you might be sitting still, but you see the same situation differently. So here I represented that one sees victory, the other sees the uphill effort that it took to get to that. And so this is where we start to go into the power of Excalidraw in Obsidian, because in Obsidian, the images are not embedded into each visual. They are linked to the visual. So my icon here of this guy pushing this big rock uphill is not part of, I mean, it's linked to this image, but it's not in this file. And because it's linked, this creates this amazing opportunity that I can jump to many different nodes and I can have this connection. And this is where I show Jerry that, in fact, if I bring up ExcaliBrain, and so I'm going to open ExcaliBrain now. If I open ExcaliBrain, then in ExcaliBrain, we can actually look at these nodes in something similar to TheBrain. Now, of course, it's not so dynamic as TheBrain, and this is different from a number of reasons. First of all, it's static. Second, it's generated from Markdown documents, and then it has items here on the right-hand side as well, which TheBrain doesn't. So there are differences. But what you can see here is this card, and let me turn this on. So I can actually bring in the visual card here in the center. This card is linked to all of these other notes and ideas in my Obsidian Vault or in my note-taking system. And through these connections, I'm able to navigate from idea to idea. And this is what creates this, this amazing connected system of thought. So here, if we now move on to the actual illustrate, so this illustration here, you will see that I have my icon for link and paper, cognitive loops, music, image, OpenAI, type of, it's the type of illustrations because it's actually still a next level image. And in the type of illustrations, then it's the icon hard work. And so here you can see what else icon hard work is linked to. And now I remember that indeed our conversation was about this, that in the self-paced course, I was actually looking at the Idea Atlas. So this was the card that I was looking at, and here, so if you look at the Idea Atlas, then what I was showing that this actual illustration, so the Idea Atlas has this mapping out of primary and secondary ideas, etc., and how this is then connected to a whole bunch of other nodes. So for example, it's connected to my article on a page for how to read a paragraph. So that takes us back to Paul and Linda Elder's book. And here I'm already connected to their PDF document. So this way I get this connectivity that this single illustration. So if we come back here for a second, so this single illustration is used across the board in lots of different nodes. And as I use this, I actually connect ideas. And this is where we actually went to my icon curiosity, the person thinking. And here on this graph, I have the association. So this is the associations curiosity node, and I open this. This is going to take a little while for it to open. Scroll back to content. So this is the node, but I think let's look at it here instead. So what I do when I have all of these nodes that share an image, I sometimes plot it out on what I call an idea mixer or this associations graph. And so what you can see here is I'm using this icon in many different places, and it's usually super interesting. Where else have I used that icon, and what connection can I find through the use of that icon? And so you can see here that in case of curiosity, I've used it on, in all sorts of different nodes. I won't go into the details here, but doing these analyses can lead to unexpected connections. And I think we indeed were talking about one of my illustrations here, and let me just figure out which illustration it could have been, but frankly, probably doesn't matter that much. We can click any of these. So for example, I was creating this illustration for chapter 4 of Tiny Experiments yesterday. And if I open chapter 4 here, then for example, I have this watch here, or this clock, and I can open this clock. And of course, this clock is not just an isolated clock. It's used on a whole bunch of other illustrations. So for example, it's used in the illustration of the anatomy of a finite game. And wow, this is so relevant. So when I think about tiny experiments and where Anne Lore talks about here in this, so let me just click this button here that this stays here. So in chapter 4, Anne Lore talks about the two words in Greek for time. So Chronos is the ticking clock. It's focused on doing, while Kairos is this unfolding, being present in time, focused on being type of clock. And just looking at this image now, I have a very clear connection. So in Finite and Infinite Games, James B. Carse talks about finite game as games that have a definite end and they are played to win a game. An infinite game, in contrast to a finite game, is a game that you play to continue to play. And indeed, I think the Chronos, the ticking clock of toxic productivity, of making most of every single second in our life, ticking all the boxes. So this is a short summary of the image that and Lore uses in the book. So this is your life in weeks, and then there's this big page with tiny boxes, and each box is a week in your life. But of course, if you think about it, your experience of time is different, because some moments you experience as extremely long, other moments you experience as short. And so that's why I have this here. But now that I look at this clock, and that I found this same clock in the anatomy of finite game, this is just amazing. So this, I didn't notice it until now, and I'm so happy I did, because this is a connection I would have never found if I was thinking about this. But indeed, so the tiny experiments is the typical infinite game. So let's just look for our book on a page for finite and infinite games. Then you will see that in contrast, an infinite game, the purpose of the game is to prevent the game from coming to an end, and you play with the rules in order to keep the game going, while a finite game is focused on winning. And then Kars goes on all of these dualities in his book, like move versus touch, titles versus name, theatrical, dramatical, serious versus playful. And I think what Lore talks about is indeed the seriousness of finite games, the seriousness of productivity versus the playfulness of tiny experiments. But yeah, so that's the sort of the discussion we had with Jerry. Of course, it was much longer than this quick video, but I just find it so engaging, so much fun to travel my notes via links. And indeed, in the beginning, I think Jerry was asking, what tool am I using? And then I mentioned that, well, this is actually Obsidian. But of course, here you don't really experience the text-based, text-heavy style of Obsidian. These are all visual notes. Now, of course, on the back of these notes, if I flip this note over, then there is a text document. Is each of the drawings, each of the Excalidraw drawings in Obsidian are saved as markdown files. And if I click here and open the document as a markdown file, that's what I call flipping the note around. I can have some additional data. So here you can see I have some of these notes. So I have a quote where this comes from the book. So this is actually here a link to my literature notes on atomic habits. And if I control click this, then it takes me to my literature notes, to this part where I read this idea in my notes. But then I also have here at the bottom, I have this markup that is the actual drawing. It's compressed, so it doesn't bother search in Obsidian, but essentially this is the Obsidian environment. Here you have the file navigation and search, etc. But really what I enjoy about Excalidraw and this visual thinking is because images are not embedded into the nodes, but they are linked. This linkage creates this other dimension of associations. This makes it a more intuitive, more free-flowing thinking environment. And I really believe that you come to different type of associations when you write than when you see things. And I'm back to this example. I'm still shocked by this realization that indeed Chronos and Kairos is the finite and infinite games. It is the same duality that is there in so many different aspects of what we do. So yeah, I think this is an amazing find. But for me, the message I want to get across through this video is that there is this highly associative, engaging visual way of connecting with your ideas, connecting your ideas with one another, and overall to think and to reflect on what you read. So here you can see I summarize the chapter, I get this visual summary of the chapter, I create this connectivity, I reflect on the book, and I work in this super engaging, fun visual environment. And as a bonus, I get this brain-like mind map that works from my markdown notes, from the front and from the back, from the embedded items. So for example, here you can see that I have some ontology here, like reminds me of and similar to. And so the way that works is if I flip it over, you can see here numerical boundaries reminds me of illustration, designing a scoreboard. And that of course takes me to a different node, and designing a scoreboard comes from decoding greatness. So this is then a different book, different nodes, but you can see how these connections work. And of course, this node as well has its connections. It links to atomic habits in terms of the similar to connection, etc. So this connectivity is, I think, this is the moment when your knowledge system comes alive. So if you enjoyed this, then I recommend you to place a pre-order for Sketch Your Mind. I talk about this entire framework in Sketch Your Mind. I lead you through this. And then if you need some hands-on practice for how this works, then I highly recommend checking out the self-paced course. And I think even more so, I highly recommend joining a cohort like Cohort 14. At the moment, I don't yet have a date for Cohort 14. It's probably going to be in the summer, but a cohort gives you this hands-on practical experience that you can practice all of this. And as I showed you here, we go through these 5 sessions where we create our concept map, then we create concept visuals, we do a story planning, story building part, we create visual Zettelkasten cards, so we flip the page over and create notes on the back, and then we have the final showcase where we create a book on a page. So I think the ultimate experience is the self-paced course, but I think as an entry point, Sketch Your Mind will give you the overall concept and how it works. And from there, you can build your understanding further. So I hope you enjoyed this. Again, I apologize that I didn't have Jerry here, but I tried to lead you through a similar conversation as we had, of course, without Jerry's questions. But hopefully this was still enjoyable. Thank you.